coming up.
Premier Higgs, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Before we start, I'd just like to have, before you raise a point of order, I'm not here for, controversial debate.
So there's a lot of impacts of the carbon tax overall, and I want to give you lots of ramp to talk about that. But also, we're hearing it very loudly.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask.
Sorry, Mr. Bragdon, I'll stop your time.
So is it the case that you're more interested in playing politics than actually looking after the affordability of New Brunswickers and tackling climate change?
On the contrary, I think the playing politics I've witnessed here in the last half hour. The point of the issue on the carbon tax is saying, all right, can we, if we adopt the backstop, then people will get a check. Is that check offsetting the real costs they have? No, it's not.
The clear price gouging by oil and gas companies. And, I looked at Gas Buddy and looked at New Brunswick, and the price of gas in New Brunswick has gone up 20 cents since January. 20 cents.
Well, listen, I won't take part in this circus. I have a new jacket on and I don't want to get it dirty today.
Do you think we have a good understanding of exactly the unbelievable extent to which the carbon tax is hurting Atlantic Canadians and New Brunswickers in particular?
You can say, well, I might say it anyway.
Point of
I'm
order.
not saying it anyway. I'm providing a solution to do something better.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering about the use of props. I see something behind Mr. Ellis that could be in the prop category. Thank you.
To be more specific, my eyes are probably not as strong as yours.
Well, I hate to use the sloganeering of our Conservative colleagues, but I see an axe the tax sign right behind him. So,
Well, actually, Chair, that sign may say axe worthy. It could say axe throwing. I'm sorry to hear that member wants to be triggered by that, but I happen to have a riding where the Nova Scotia Agricultural College is an incredible proponent of axe throwing. And therefore, I believe that that's appropriate for me to have that there. I'm not going to comment on the things behind Ms. Atwin. Maybe there's things I don't like there. Maybe there's something Mr. Savard Tremblay has on that I don't like. Maybe I don't like the color of his new jacket. I think that that's absolutely ridiculous. So axe throwing is a very important part of life here in Cumberland Colchester, and I thank the member from Fredericton for pointing that out.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
We're here to discuss the estimates. Premier Higgs, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Before we start, I'd just like to have, before you raise a point of order, I'm not here for, controversial debate. I would just like the opportunity
point of order,
to make a comment about thinking bigger in Canada and how we can meet the climate change objectives, and we can be a major player here in New Brunswick.
We will provide time for that.
Sorry, what's your point of order? Sorry, Premier Higgs.
This is now the third meeting this week that we've had scheduled without any consultation of committee, without any instruction from committee.
Mr. Kazmierczak, can you just stick to the point of order, please, and not an editorial?
Absolutely, and I'm just about to wrap up here. Meetings during constituency weeks are
That's not a point of order. Mr. Kazmierczak, either get to the point of order or we will move back to Premier Higgs.
So my point, Mr. Chair, is I am asking the clerk to comment on whether this meeting is in contravention of both Standing Order 108 and also in contravention of the motion that this committee passed yesterday prohibiting the chair from calling meetings without consultation and consent of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you stated on page 1095 of Procedure and Practice, it states under the section convening a meeting by the chair. Committee meetings are convened by the chair acting either on a decision made by the committee or on the chair's own authority. Therefore, my advice to the chair would be that there's two mechanisms to plan a meeting. Either the committee can agree to a schedule and a specific time and plan for a meeting, or the chair has the discretion to plan meetings on his authority.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
I realized someone else had called a point of order, but I saw Mr. Sousa's hand was up. Is it on a point of order, Mr. Sousa? Or
it's on this point of order.
Okay, go ahead,
yes,
sir.
Yes, it's on a point of order. I just want clarity again from the clerk. So we have an opportunity here that the chair has the right to call these meetings, I understand, but he also has the right and the need to abide by the members' consent.
Okay, we've ruled on that already, Mr. Souza, so that's not a point of order. Thank you.
A question, Mr. Chair, and you're trying to now shut me down, and that's inappropriate. And again, it's the way you flagrantly operate independently without consulting with the members. So my question, as a point of order, is to the clerk.
Okay, Mr. Souza, you've been around for a long time as well, and it pains me to have to repeat this.
Under the section Committee Questions and Procedure Privilege, as stated by the Chair, committee may arise as a result of the failure to abide by rules. Respect the authority of the Chair. Disorder and conduct may include the use of unparliamentary language. I would cite also page 1099 in Chapter 20, stating that committee chair may adjourn the meeting if the chair decides that a case of disorder or misconduct is so serious as to prevent the committee from continuing its work.
Thanks. I think it was Mr. Long, and then I have Mr. Nakvi.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Long.
Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning. And I'm puzzled, Chair. This obviously is. I'm happy to be here.
What's your point of order, Mr. Long?
Well, Chair, I'm confused. Why is the Premier of New Brunswick here with respect to main estimates? Can you explain that? And also, Chair, I'm wondering if you're able to table any conversations or emails that led to the Premier being invited here for main estimates. Like, I've got questions on main estimates that I can certainly ask the Premier of New Brunswick.
Mr. Long, point of order, please.
I'm confused as to why the Premier of New Brunswick is invited here when we're supposed to be on main estimates. Can you explain that to me, Chair? Thank you.
Certainly. As was explained yesterday, we are on the main estimates. There is over $11 billion in spending related to the carbon tax, which is about a 66% increase from just 2 years ago, and I think about a 35% increase from last year. So it is discussion on items within the main estimates. Seven of the premiers. Mr. Long, I respected your time. I would ask you not to interrupt me. Allow me to continue, please. 7 of the 10 premiers wrote to the Liberal Finance Chair asking for a meeting to discuss this. He refused.
Chair.
I'm going to Mr. Nakvi. Go ahead.
But Chair, I have the floor right now. So, Chair, you're telling me that the Premier of New Brunswick is able to answer questions from us on the main estimates? Is that not why we're here, Chair?
Ms. Long, the premiers representing 70% of Canadians have been invited to speak. It's not for you to decide their relevance as a witness, just like you could not, question the relevance of perhaps a parliamentary budget officer being here yesterday. I have advised you why.
Passed just yesterday, and I'll just quickly read this.
Mr. Chair,
which says,
please, Mr. Nakvi,
just get to your point of order.
I'm getting to my point. I am getting to the point of order.
Liberals are trying to do, trying to block Mr. Premier Higgs from testifying. Please just get to the point of order.
So with all due respect, that is not my intention.
Please get to the point of order.
Point of order. Point of order.
We already have someone at the floor, Mr. Kuzmierczak.
You're a respectful member of Parliament, that you will not act in contravention of a motion of your own committee. So I just wanted some clarity as to what steps were followed to meet these conditions, and would like to also hear from the clerk as well, without you pointing an answer to him. Thank you.
I was not pointing or directing, but I appreciate that incorrect perspective. The motion yesterday, I made very clear, I don't believe is retroactive. So the meeting had already been called, the notice had already been put up, witnesses already done. Nowhere in the notice did it say retroactive.
As you stated, I would leave it to the chair and the committee to interpret the motion and how it should be used moving forward. At this point, I would echo what the chair stated, that the notice was indeed published before this motion was adopted. That being said, based on the terms of the motion, I would leave it to the chair and the committee to decide how to interpret the mechanism and the way to move forward with the motion as it stands.
Mr. Kuzmierczak.
I was just, I was hoping to get the second part of my question answered, which the clerk provided his testimony, which I do appreciate. And again, we're all ready to...
Mr. Kuzmierczak, can we get to the point of order, please?
Yeah, I was just saying thank you for finally
Mr.
responding
Kuzmierczak, please get to your point of order.
Questions that I have. That's it. Thank you.
It's clear what the Liberals are doing. They've raised a number of non-point of order point of orders. It's time to hear from Premier Higgs. As he said, he's not interested in any type of partisan dispute or argument. Neither am I.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, you have your hand up?
Yes. Well, listen, I won't take part in this circus. I have a new jacket on and I don't want to get it dirty today.
Mr. Higgs, Premier Higgs,
Point of order, sir.
we go
Sir,
back
one
to
more
you,
point
sir.
of order.
Sorry, Premier.
Sorry, Premier. I'm just reflecting on the words that the clerk was saying in response to my point of order, and I heard him say that it is up to the committee members to determine the interpretation of the motion passed. I think he said both chair and committee members, because you don't act, with all due respect, no, you, sir, the chair does not act in
point of
isolation.
order, please, sir?
The point of order is that there was a clear intention on the part of the committee members when they passed the motion yesterday that it would apply to all witnesses, retrospective as well.
We appreciate that.
And
I've
so
stated very clearly that there's nothing that the meeting said was retroactive, or the motion said retroactive. If it did, it would be killing next April, or the NDP study next week, and the Liberal study on the red tape. Premier Higgs, go ahead, please.
We all don't like the carbon tax. I think we can all agree with party on we don't like the carbon tax. But we all have the same focus of how do we reduce emissions, how do we make a major impact on climate change and for the better. And that's the goal that we are aligned on. So the point I'm reacting here to is mostly in relation to the Premier's, the Prime Minister's comments here just recently about give us a solution. You know, we're open to solutions. And so what we're seeing as an opportunity here in New Brunswick is exactly what's happening in the West in relation to the development of LNG and the shipment of LNG across worldwide and the shutdown of coal plants. Now, we have the Prime Minister stated there's no business case in New Brunswick. That's absolutely not true. The situation is we have a business case. We don't have a gas supply currently, and that is the issue, the gas supply. Now, is it economical to bring it from the West or bring it from the U.S.? No, it hasn't proven to be based on the cost of transportation. But it is economical to develop our very own resource here in New Brunswick. It's economical to the point that we have 77 trillion standard cubic feet here in our province. And with a consolidated effort from the federal government and the First Nations, we can deal with not only having an impact around the world by shutting down coal plants that are being built at record numbers in China, 80 to 100 a year, coal plants that exist in Europe at 174 in that range, coal plants that even in Atlantic Canada that are running, 4 of them that could be shut down, and 50% reduction when you do that. So my plea here is across party lines to say, let's think bigger. Let's look at Canada as a solution to world environmental impact and changes.
Point of order, Chair.
As opposed to us being exactly focused on our internal affordability and the costs every day of living.
I apologize, Premier Higgs. I just have a point of order. Mr. Long, please make it brief.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just, again, Chair, I'm confused on relevance.
This is an opening statement, Mr. Long. Please show respect for the Premier. You may have disagreements with us, but please show respect for the Premier of your province.
Chair, I
it's an opening statement. Let him finish this.
But again, I'm just wondering the relevance, and I'm also wondering, Chair, if you can explain again which of the votable items referred to in the committee contains the Canada carbon rebate. I'm confused. You able to let us know that?
Explained that yesterday, Mr. Long. Mr. Premier Higgs, go ahead. That's not a point of order. Mr. Higgs, go ahead,
sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to continue in relation to the affordability point. We are one of the few nations that have the opportunity to have it all. We have the resources, which we've always thrived on. We have the ability to have major climate change impact beyond our borders, beyond the 1.5% of emissions that currently we're focused on internally. And we would do what other countries are doing to take advantage of offsetting coal plants, but offsetting demands in Europe for oil and gas from Russia. We have the ability in Canada to just think bigger and make an impact around the world. So while we can develop these resources, we can use those resources to develop new technology, to build better, cleaner environmental industries, to actually reduce the cost of impact of everyday costs of people living and working in the province, which means ultimately reducing the carbon tax. But it's not an isolated solution. It's a solution that has a broader impact around the world, and it can be proven. It can be proven very clearly that it has a huge impact on reduction of emissions worldwide. We may want to think we're going to solve the problems in our own little bubble, but we are not. So I only ask the Prime Minister and all of you to let's have the opportunity. Let science look at what potential we can really have in reducing emissions and how we can play a major scene on the world scene. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier Higgs. We'll start with Mr. Bragdon. Welcome to OGGO, Mr. Bragdon. The floor is yours for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Premier. And sorry that you had to experience the inner wranglings of partisanship here at the beginning and onset of our committee deliberations today. But moving quickly here, we understand very clearly, Canadians are speaking very loudly from coast to coast, including from New Brunswick, that the cost of the carbon tax is prohibitive, and most Canadians are worse off as a result of it and its impact on their standard of living and their ability to make ends meet at the end of each month. The PBO has made that very clear. 7 out of 10 premiers, including yourself, has called for this spike, this hike to be spiked in the carbon tax, and they also want immediate relief and would prefer that this tax would be axed altogether. It's punitive, it's prohibitive, it's disproportionately affects those of us that live in small towns and rural communities, and there's a lot of those small towns and rural communities here in New Brunswick. It also inhibits development and growth of our industry, especially within our agricultural sectors and natural resource sectors, which of course has an impact here in New Brunswick. So there's a lot of impacts of the carbon tax overall, and I want to give you lots of ramp to talk about that. But also, we're hearing it very loudly.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order,
income.
Mr. Chair. I just wanted to
Sorry,
ask.
Mr. Bragdon, I'll stop your time. Mr. Kuzmierczak?
I wanted to ask my honorable colleague, and I really do appreciate it. I really enjoy working with him, but can he just point to the relevance to any of the votes that we are studying in the main estimates, that we have been asked to study in the main estimates? So as a committee, we are asked to study parts of the main estimates. Can he point to the relevance?
The question should be to the chair, not to other members, Mr. Kuzmierczak. And you're aware, as you've been here for a long, long time, and you've participated in many filibusters, meandering filibusters, that we always allow a wide latitude. Continue, Mr. Bragdon.
This is beyond latitude, Mr. Chair. I mean, this has nothing to do with any of the votes.
Mr. Bragdon has the floor. Would you allow him again, please, for the sake and respect for our interpreters and those listening through the interpretation, one person with the floor at the time. Mr. Bragdon, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just continuing, Premier, we also know the impact this has on seniors with fixed incomes, and their cost of living keeps going up, but yet their incomes are fixed. This is having a huge consequence across the country on everything from heating to obviously groceries to the cost of living and the price to fill up a car. And finally, I'll end with this point, and that is that, Mr. Premier, we have such amazing potential in New Brunswick and across Canada. And taxes and regulatory overreach that this current government federally is putting on our industry sectors and on our natural resources and agriculture is prohibitive to our development and growth as a province. So with that, over to you. Thank you for being here, Premier.
Thank you for the question. And I guess in relation to the costs, by 2030, we'll quadruple our costs and tax costs related to carbon tax, the clean fuel standard tax, and the relation to the HST that goes with that. So in the sense of, is it getting more expensive to live and work in our country? Absolutely. Are we spending way too much money across the country? So if you wonder, how does this get to main estimates, or what's the point of it all? We're spending money we don't have as a nation, and we have the opportunity to offset that with real benefits in reducing the emissions and having an impact worldwide. So my point is continues to say we don't need to put the burden of climate action and climate change on the citizens of our country, and on the citizens, in my case, of this province, because we have the ability to fund it and provide the funds for technology to help people deal with affordability, to help people deal with situations that they're finding too difficult to meet everyday needs. So my issue is clear. Let's look at options. We need to think bigger. Our situation in the Canada is that we're too isolated in our bubble. We're not reaching our potential to help the world. And we're causing huge impact, financial impact, right across this country on our citizens. And it's unnecessary. We all have the same objective. We just have to figure out an easier way to get there and a reality in a way to get there. Because currently, this path is not reality. It's not how we're going to manage the future and meet our goals. And that is the point of all of this discussion. For me, it's about look at the science, look at the development of SMRs, look at hydrogen. It's all well and good, but the timing is not going to meet the needs of what the current schedule provides. And as a result, people are just going to pay more and pay more. And what is going to be the impact on the environment? Is it going to be like 8% of our 1.5%? And we think we're solving the problems of the world by doing that, when we could be receiving, probably making an impact worldwide of 10% or 15%. But that could be a calculated number, very easily understood. So I want to continue to argue we just need to let the science let us help the world reduce emissions, not think we're solving it by our own little bubble calculation.
Mr. Premier, a quick question on that to follow up. Has the Prime Minister and his cabinet been reaching out to you regularly and other First Ministers talking about the pain that this carbon tax is obviously having on Canadians and how it could be mitigated? Are you having regular communication from the Prime Minister and his cabinet on this?
Well, there's various discussions internally, I guess, with members locally, but the solutions are only, okay, how do we offset this measure? How do we offset that measure? When in fact you get to the root cause of why do we have this measure to begin with? So then you get down to the philosophy of the federal government in relation to the carbon tax. And you say, for what it is intended to achieve, is it achieving that? Because what was this unintended consequence, what it's going to cause on affordability of every issue from groceries to that right down the supply chain? Was that the intended consequence? And if it was, it's a poorly implemented process. And if you look at that and you say, what are other countries doing? How do they manage this? And then how can we manage it based on our abilities and utilizing our entire natural resources to be part of that solution?
That's great. Mr. Chair, do I have a little bit more time?
15 seconds.
All right. Well, Mr. Premier, speaking of the potential that we have as a province, by removing the carbon tax, if you can give a quick answer to that, what immediate impact would it have?
Well, in a couple seconds, Premier Higgs.
Immediately 20 cents, roughly 17 cents on the per liter, which would have a huge impact. But then going the full distance, it could take off down the road about 50, 60 cents a liter.
Thank you, Premier Higgs.
By 2030.
Thank you, Premier Higgs. Ms. Atwin, go ahead, please.
In the provincial legislature, there was set to be a debate on removing the provincial sales tax from the looming electricity increases that we're going to be seeing in the province on April 1st. And you denied, your party denied that debate, and you're here with us instead. So is this for a case of look over here and not what I have control over back at home?
No, control over is a reactionary process of what we're seeing across the country of increased costs. So that was my point in relation to, we have a policy that incurs a counter policy to offset a poor policy. Okay. And that's
sorry, I have to keep going. So Premier Higgs, when you decided to drop the New Brunswick carbon pricing system, you said at the time during your press conference, and I'm going to quote you here, "We know that recently, and especially over the last few months, New Brunswickers have been feeling the impacts of inflation and are struggling with the higher prices on everything from food to fuel. By changing our approach, we can help New Brunswickers get money back into their pockets in the form of a quarterly rebate check from the federal government." I happen to agree with you, Premier, but I see that you've recently changed your stance on this. So
no,
is it the case that you're more interested in playing politics and actually looking after the affordability of New Brunswickers and tackling climate change?
Well, on the contrary, I think the playing politics I've witnessed here in the last half hour. The point of the issue on the carbon tax is saying, all right, can we, if we adopt the backstop, then people will get a check. Is that check offsetting the real costs they have? No, it's not.
Can you table that information to show us that the calculations?
with the calculation going right through to groceries, to cost of commodities,
Can
because
you
it's
share that
more than
information
fuel.
with us?
It's more than fuel. Yeah, I think there's a recent study, whether it was a Fraser Institute, that was showing the impact on the carbon tax. I know what the Bank of Canada has said recently, but there are many studies showing that. So I'm sure
And
there's
sir,
other relevant data.
how much is the average rebate for a New Brunswicker, including the 20% rural top-up?
It's probably around $200, I think, a month, quarter, or in that range. About $700 a year, $736 a year.
I'm also going to quote, you've got a Twitter post here about your appearance today. You mentioned participating in the Standing Committee of Government's Operations and Estimates to relay your concerns and stop the tax grab once and for all. So, sir, are you familiar with the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act?
Somewhat, maybe not as familiar as you are at this stage.
So Section 2.2 is the return of pollution pricing fuel charge proceeds to jurisdictions, and it breaks down the rebate process. So 90% of the fuel charge proceeds are returned directly to individuals and families through the Canadian carbon rebate. The remainder of the fuel charge proceeds are returned through federal programming to support schools, hospitals, small and medium-sized businesses, colleges, universities, municipalities. So I'm just wondering, which of the projects would you not have support? Would you like us to not see supported? There's energy retrofits for Indigenous communities infrastructure. We've got schools that are bringing down their price on their pollution in general, and they're actually saving money on their bills. So would you like to see these programs canceled along with the rebates?
Well, I think we were supplying supports to a lot of initiatives around through these different communities prior to a carbon tax ever coming on. To say we create more hurt on people in order to provide more federal money to distribute as they would see fit, I don't think that's a solution. I don't think that just charging people more so the federal government can have more say in where the money is distributed. I do not think that is a policy that you hurt one group in order to distribute to another.
So also, Mr. Premier, New Brunswick government passed legislation in 2022 to allow oil companies to pass clean fuel charges onto consumers and instructed the Energy and Utilities Board to determine what hypothetical costs might be. An independent analysis determined that here in New Brunswick, we are compensating companies for costs that do not exist, overcharging New Brunswickers at the pump anywhere from 5.6 cents to 8 cents a liter. So how much of this is rebated back to New Brunswickers?
So, Ms. Allen, are you familiar with the fact that we have regulated pricing here in New Brunswick and in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland and PEI?
So it's actually my questioning time, sir.
No, well, I guess let's put all the facts on the table, because every one of those provinces.
Why is it okay to give money to oil and gas companies and not to New Brunswickers?
Let me answer your question. Every one of those provinces raised their price when the Clean Fuel Standards Act came into play. Every one of them. And our price is the cheapest that's in Atlantic Canada. So why did they do that? Why did they do that? I'll answer why they did that. Because the regulated pricing formula includes regulated changes to industry that are brought down by government. So that's why they did that. Our change was only to reflect the same logic that other regulated pricing has. Now, we could argue whether regulated pricing makes sense or doesn't make sense.
Than the rest of
but
the country.
No, I'm telling you the same thing was raised in the other three provinces. Maybe you missed that, but because it seems to have not been talked about much. Regulated pricing causes for a complete addition of all the incurred costs in order to arrive at the retail price.
So you disagree with the independent analysis that says that we're overcharging New Brunswickers at the pump?
Well, we have EUB looking at that. That's the purpose.
Sir, we've seen that greenhouse gas emissions have come down by 8%. You've mentioned that this policy has done nothing. There's no measurable impact, and that the Canadian Climate Institute would disagree. Are you prepared to table a plan for New Brunswick that could achieve the similar or better results?
Worldwide? Absolutely.
For Canada?
Well, Canada, that's the whole point. We're thinking in a bubble. We are not thinking. Do you think that if China is building 80 to 90 coal plants a year, that would dwarf anything we can do in Canada? That we're safe,
so you don't
we're
think we should do
solving
anything
climate
in Canada?
change? I propose to make the difference worldwide that we can actually achieve.
Premier, sorry to interrupt. Premier Higgs, that is our time. Ms. Atlins, that's our time.
The clear price gouging by oil and gas companies. And, I looked at Gas Buddy and looked at New Brunswick, and the price of gas in New Brunswick has gone up 20 cents since January. 20 cents. We're talking, April 1st, the federal government is talking about 3 cents. So 20 cents. And I'm just wondering if you've spoken out on behalf of New Brunswickers that are getting gouged at the pump. by these oil and gas companies that are raking in massive profits.
So maybe you know how the pricing model works, and basically it's a market, New York Harbor market, where the regulated pricing is set, and then the calculations go beyond that. But what I do know for sure is that 20 cents of that right now is carbon tax, and by 2030, 62 cents of that will be carbon tax, and that goes to the federal government and in a circle program that is supposed to be solving climate change. So we do know that, don't we? So 60 cents will be in 2030 sent to the federal government. And why? What is that achieving? So I would say that maybe there's a combination to look at everything, but we do know how to take 60 cents a liter off of the price of commodities at the pumps and what people are paying.
I guess what I'm hoping, Premier Higgs, is that you would speak out against the corporate price gouging that's really the factor that's costing New Brunswickers so much. But I'm going to move on to another question. Pierre Poilievre has said a Conservative government would not pull Canada out of the Paris Agreement. Is that a position that you support?
I think that there's a focused need to continue on the emission reduction program, and if the Paris Accord is, it's important to carry on in that program. I'm not suggesting we're pulling out of anything, and so my suggestion is simply for us to be broader than Canada, to think bigger about the
But to be clear, and that's fine. We all want to think globally, but to be clear.
But we're not. We're not thinking globally. We're not even pretending to think globally.
My question, Premier Higgs, you said you support staying in the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is almost entirely predicated on reducing domestic emissions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bachrach, we're over time. Can you just wrap up your question, please, sir?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you saying, Premier Higgs, that you think we should stay in this international agreement but not live up to its core tenets?
I'm saying that we can do so much better. So if we are sitting idle, costing people more money, and we're not impacting the world emissions, then who are we fooling? Maybe the Paris Accord should be modified to say those nations that can have a greater impact should have the opportunity to do so.
Thanks, Premier Higgs.
If you do a comparison,
I have to cut you off there, I'm afraid. We're past time. Okay. Mr. Ellis, please. Welcome to OGGO for 5 minutes, sir.
Well, thanks, Chair. It's good to be back at OGGO. And Mr. Premier, thanks for being here today in this very important topic. Clearly, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, where I grew up, of course, in New Brunswick, and happy to be representing Nova Scotia here in Cumberland, Colchester. Our Premier here, Premier Houston, said the carbon tax is misguided and unfair. And we know, of course, very clearly that those of us who choose to live rurally suffer significant from the carbon tax. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about, sir, about the stories that you've heard from the New Brunswickers that you represent. Certainly, we know I'm getting stories every single day about the affordability problem. So if you could comment a bit about that, Premier, I appreciate that.
Well, certainly there's no question about that. We are a sparsely populated province. We don't have the mass transit systems. We don't have the subways. And the idea is that people use their vehicles every day to get to and from work. And so it has a greater impact on a province like ours, and it's a reality. So yes, we hear it every day when people spend more, and we have a greater demand every day to, well, how do we offset this high cost? How do we do this differently? And so that becomes the whole argument around the carbon tax. So when we say what it's actually achieving, 8% of the 1.5% of world emissions, it's saying we're taking a lot of hurt because of this ideological approach to emissions in the world or climate change, and that we're really going to make a difference in Canada. And so I guess the point is, I just don't see the value in continuing to find a way to mitigate a very poor policy. And fighting this carbon tax is a reality. We know what people think across this country. They believe in climate change. We can provide a solution. The Prime Minister asked for a solution. I think I've outlined a real possibility here to make a major impact. And we're stuck on saying, no, carbon tax. But I'm sure that you're not getting that at any one of your ridings, because this affordability is real. When you stop at the pumps, when you go into grocery stores, when you go to the lumber stores, when you buy anything that involves transportation, and getting to New Brunswick, transportation is in everything that we buy and sell. So I said the important part here is that let's face the reality of what it means to everyday people. And I'm saying 20 cents right now 17.6 off of the pumps immediately would be a real start. We're evaluating regulated pricing to see are we better off or without it. We've had it 20 years. But the idea is that we know 60 cents is coming. We know it's going to continue to get worse. So let's fix it now and make a difference and still impact the world emissions in a positive way.
Well, thank you very much for that, Premier. Very insightful on behalf of all your constituents out there. It's interesting, sir. You know, we talked a bit about the rebate, of course, that our Liberal colleagues want to say is so great. Do you think that we actually have an understanding of how much this actually cost every day people from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, that the carbon tax, of course, as you mentioned, that it's applied to everything that we have that comes on via supply chains. Do you think we have a good understanding of exactly the unbelievable extent to which the carbon tax is hurting Atlantic Canadians and New Brunswickers in particular?
No, I do not. And then we talk about the isolated issue at the pump, and we're getting a rebate based on what you spend on fuel. Well, that isn't a rebate on groceries. That's not a rebate on hardware purchases or any other purchase. So I don't think, and there doesn't seem to be any discussion about that. So this idea that, you know, we increase, I think we've increased the numbers dramatically in the federal service in order to deliver on a circle program, tax and circle back, and think this is a solution. I mean, it's really has I think come to light as the prices go up. And this next one is we've had my colleagues in the government and in the opposition say, you know, we shouldn't do this because they're getting the same message I am. So these are, you know, certainly the Liberal leader here is saying the same thing. We shouldn't do this. So I think that's a pretty big message themselves. The Premier of Newfoundland said the same thing. We shouldn't do this. So if they didn't think that their own federal government was creating hardship in their province, would they be saying this? You can say, well, I might say it anyway. I'm not saying it anyway. I'm providing a solution to do something better.
Sorry, there was a point of order. Is that one I didn't quite hear? Sorry.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering about the use of props. I see something behind Mr. Ellis that could be in the prop category. Thank you.
To be more specific, my eyes are probably not as strong as yours.
Well, I hate to use the sloganeering of our Conservative colleagues, but I see an axe the tax sign right behind him. So that would be inappropriate, I think, for the context of today.
Thanks. Doc Ellis, if you could just take that down before we proceed.
Well, actually, Chair, that sign may say axe worthy. It could say axe throwing. I'm sorry to hear that member wants to be triggered by that, but I happen to have a riding where the Nova Scotia Agricultural College is an incredible proponent of axe throwing. And therefore, I believe that that's appropriate for me to have that there. I'm not going to comment on the things behind Ms. Atwin. Maybe there's things I don't like there. Maybe there's something Mr. Savard Tremblay has on that I don't like. Maybe I don't like the color of his new jacket. I think that that's absolutely ridiculous. So axe throwing is a very important part of life here in Cumberland Colchester, and I thank the member from Fredericton for pointing that out. Premier, that being said, you know, it would appear that all of your Atlantic colleagues are speaking out against this, and perhaps unanimously in the legislatures as well. And despite the fact of what the Liberals want, it appears very clear, sir, that you have some incredible ideas. And I want to thank you for your time here in committee today, your insightfulness, and you're a great representation of all New Brunswickers, of which my mom, who's 91, still lives in New Brunswick. And I thank you for that, sir.
Why are you here today? Why are you before OGGO that's studying Maine estimates? And I'm wondering if you can share with the committee when you were first approached to appear, actually before this committee or any committee. And I'm wondering if you can also table any documents about appearing before any committee here. So when were you approached to appear before OGGO?
Well, we sent a letter some time ago, as you know, 7 of my colleagues, and about this whole process, or about the situation, how we felt collectively. And then from that point, we learned of this committee and the opportunity of looking at the costs of living in Canada and the fact of what the government is spending in terms of servicing the country. And the idea of having an opportunity to share exactly what we're seeing, I think is very relevant for us here in New Brunswick, but as I point out, it's relevant for colleagues from both sides of the table. And quite frankly, Mr. Long, you should be in the same camp with your colleagues provincially that are saying we shouldn't have this tax and this increase.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Premier Higgs, for being here. You've joined 70% of Canadians and 6 other premiers, including a Liberal Premier, Andrew Furey, to call on this Liberal NDP government to spike the hike on April the 1st that will raise the carbon tax 23%, making the cost of everything more expensive. Can you please explain to this committee why you're calling on this and why it's so important to spike the hike?
Well, you know, it's like putting a needle in. I guess you keep doing a little bit at a time, and you think, well, it doesn't hurt that bad, so I can stand it. And then all of a sudden, you look back and you say, I've added 60 cents a liter to gas. At what point do you bring this thing to reality? So, you know, the analysis done earlier said, well, it's only going to be 60 cents on a fill up. Well, currently, you know, with the 17.6 cents, and where we are right now, you know, it relies to an extra $10 on the total carbon tax to date. But then you keep moving that along to the 60 cents, it becomes more and more relevant. So you're at some point, you bring it up and say, okay, when are we going to realize that this is a punitive tax, not achieving the big picture results, and we think we're saving the world on climate change? And that's the point. We are causing negative impact on every citizen. So you can argue with me, or you can look at across the country and see 7 provinces that are saying this is a problem. And you can say, well, what can we do about it? And 7 provinces that are represented by, different parties, that this is a problem. So at some point, you'd like to think there would be an ear to hear this and say, all right, yeah, we're getting deeper now. It's costing more now. It's not just about another 3 cents in April. It's about all of the cumulative effect of increased cost of energy, and particularly in provinces that have no other alternative.
The PBO once again reiterated yesterday that the carbon tax is has a net negative impact on families. Can you talk a little bit more to the negative impact it's playing on families in New Brunswick?
Well, to me, the issue becomes calculating the full spectrum of what it means to have our energy costs. We've seen costs go up in every sector, and the grocery stores particularly that have gone up, in building supplies gone up. And so our inflationary costs have gone up. So we're seeing a little change in inflation rates, so let's hope that continues to drop. In New Brunswick, we've seen assessments go up dramatically, but we've had a population growth here for the first time in many years, so it's had an impact. But the cost of housing is preventing more houses being built, and so people just look and say, well, is the government going to come up with a solution here to solve the problem? Well, let's focus on the problem. Let's get back to the policies that are creating a problem, or certainly having a major impact on making it worse, rather than try to pretend we should put Band-Aids on in order to mitigate just a poor policy.
This Liberal NDP government consistently says Canada is the problem. Premier Higgs, can you please let this Liberal NDP government know how Canada can be the solution and why it's not the problem?
Yes, I did. And what I was saying earlier is about what we're seeing in BC and Alberta with export of energy and natural gas. What we can do in the East Coast is the very same thing, is export with natural gas and LNG. And the issue is that is a climate action that mitigates the affordability challenge, because the revenue would be used both for offsetting costs for people in the province, and it would be used for technology development. When we develop the technology, people are going to be more acute, more astute about how they can manage and reduce their emissions. You know, we talk about the electric cars. We're not able to cope with electric car productions or the battery productions to meet the requirements for 2035. And so the point is, let's have a realistic plan to transition through this time period, but let's use our resources to pay for it rather than everybody's home, everybody's pocket. Let the resources pay for the change that we all know we must.
Thank you, Premier. My last question is, the Governor of the Bank of Canada clearly stated that 0.6 of the overall inflation number in Canada today is contributed by this carbon tax scam. 0.6. And if we got rid of it, it would put a massive dent in inflation that might help to lower the interest rates faster after we've seen this government double the cost of mortgages and houses and rents. Can you please tell us how important it is to axe this tax on housing?
Well, I think that
Very brief.
It's very important. I mean, to look at all these taxes that are being put on buildings, on the issues of fuel, of the issues of commodities, it all flows into higher costs. So I think that we just need to rethink our program and what we can do in the world to have the greatest impact.
Thank you, Premier Higgs.
And Premier Higgs, we'll just kind of pick up on a piece you mentioned about the forestry sector, for example. I know that we have sustained use of aerial spraying of glyphosate in the province, which has actually created a monoculture in our forestry sector, which could actually lead to more susceptible conditions for forest fires. So to point to that as kind of a big piece of that plan is concerning to me. You also mentioned, Indigenous communities and the potential for, natural gas exploration. I would remind you that there was significant demonstrations and protests across the country or across the province during that time because it wasn't something that Indigenous communities wanted in their backyard. So has that relationship changed at all? I'd like some insight on that piece.
I would think the reality is starting to set in that this is a huge economic benefit. It's done across the country, particularly in BC and in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But the idea that the development of natural gas is not new. It's well established. The impact it can have in world emissions, it's well established. And yes, I'd like to think the First Nations are learning more about this so they understand economically and environmentally what it can mean. So that is the process that is underway. But we could certainly make an impact with the federal government being part of that. But I want to go back to the forestry comment and the glyphosate. The biggest use of glyphosate is in farming and agriculture.
But we're talking about forestry sector.
Yeah. Well, you can't isolate one without the other. It might be easier to talk about forestry right now, but the whole point
aerial spraying
is mostly in agriculture and in the forestry sector. I want to point out the fact that...
Does it not create monocultures, though, that make our forests more susceptible to forest fires?
Threaten
biodiversity, which should be part of any climate plan?
Let me answer. It was my question, was it not?
Well, it's my time, actually, sir.
All right, your time and my answer then.
Sure,
please,
I'd like the answer to that.
The idea is that we have the lowest loss in Canada for land lost by fire. And that is, we're number one in Canada for forest products. I said that, but we are also recognized leader in forest fire protection. And the reason for that is because we have not only a quick attack unit in order to mitigate their loss.
Sorry, Premier, I need to wrap up, please.
Okay. But we have actually an active forest management system and harvesting. Old forests are not being allowed just to rot and become fire traps.